The popular narrative claims Hamilton was simply outdriven by the McLaren Mercedes front four at Zandvoort. That assumption is flatly wrong based on the confirmed qualifying data. He actually secured 5th place with a 1:11.494 lap time on Saturday. He achieved this only after deliberately running a massive rain risk on his final flying lap. This strategic gamble allowed him to beat both Red Bulls by 0.3 of a second. The real story is not about raw speed, but a fundamental disconnect between driver and machine. So what exactly prevented him from challenging Lando Norris's 1:11.133 pole time? That question hangs over the entire weekend because the gap involves complex technical factors. Ferrari rushed a new SF26 floor to Zandvoort as a direct evolution of their Barcelona package. Charles Leclerc adapted to its aeromechanical balance changes almost instantly during practice sessions. Hamilton has not yet completely adapted to those same revisions despite being the lead championship challenger. This creates uncomfortable tension entering Sunday's race where points are absolutely critical. He currently sits roughly 50 points behind Kimi Antonelli in the driver's standings, yet he starts behind 2 McLarens and 2 Mercedes in a compromised car. The contrast between his sprint frustration and main qualifying optimism suggests partial progress overnight. But clearly, not all issues were resolved before the final qualifying session began. He knew it. So did everyone else. Nobody said a word. That silence in the garage after sprint qualifying spoke volumes about the difficulty. Hamilton described that earlier session as not good after subtle setup adjustments failed. He lamented that the car felt completely different compared to his strong FP1 feeling. Fred Vasseur confirmed publicly that Hamilton didn't manage to put a good lap together in SQ3. The team principal stated they needed to work on the car balance to do better. This was a remarkably candid admission from the Ferrari leadership. Vasseur simultaneously praised Leclerc for delivering a very good lap just hundredths off pole. This duality is critical to understanding why Hamilton's P5 shouldn't be read as failure. He accepted that 5th is not the greatest, but could be far worse. He expressed gratitude for even being there after such a turbulent 24 hours. But here is where the uncertainty becomes a genuine narrative twist rather than a simple disclaimer. Multiple Ferrari-focused outlets confirm the new floor behaved extremely well on the soft compound. Leclerc had an excellent understanding of the car reflected in his soft tire performance. However, absolutely no source has quantified exactly how much of Hamilton's 0.331 second gap came from incomplete adaptation. We cannot definitively separate mechanical issues from other variables like wind direction or fuel load. We know the upgrades targeted more downforce across 5 components, including the diffuser and beam wing. We also know Hamilton took P5 with his final lap as rain threatened the track. Connecting those dots into a definitive explanation requires assuming facts that aren't confirmed. The true ceiling of his car remains genuinely unknown heading into Sunday. He still believes the right strategy and right execution can challenge the cars ahead. That final qualifying run demanded absolute precision under deteriorating conditions. Rain clouds were closing in on the Zandvoort circuit as Q3 reached its climax. Every driver faced the same binary choice regarding tire strategy and timing. Hamilton's team elected to send him out for one last attempt despite the gathering moisture. This decision carried enormous risk because wet patches can destroy a lap instantly. He delivered a 1:11.494 that proved just enough to secure 5th place. That time placed him exactly 331 milliseconds behind Norris. It also put him 0.4 clear of Max Verstappen in 7th. Beating both Red Bulls at their home race is no small achievement, yet the margin to the front row remained stubbornly large. George Russell qualified 2nd with a 1:11.265 for Mercedes. Kimi Antonelli took 3rd in the other Mercedes at 1:11.296. Oscar Piastri completed the top 4 lockout for McLaren at 1:11.305. Ferrari found themselves distinctly separated from that leading quartet. The weather threat fundamentally altered how every team approached those final minutes. Track temperature dropped as shadows lengthened across the banking sections. Grip levels became increasingly unpredictable with each passing minute. Drivers who hesitated paid the price with compromised lap times. Those who committed too early risked encountering rain before completing their flying laps. Hamilton threaded that needle with remarkable composure given his earlier struggles. His confidence in the car had been visibly shaken during sprint qualifying just hours before. Making such a bold strategic call required trust that had been severely tested. The fact he executed it cleanly speaks to his experience at the circuit. Zandvoort punishes even minor errors with immediate consequences. There is zero margin for correction on those narrow-banked corners. One slight misjudgment in the rain would have meant starting well outside the points. Instead, he locked in a position that keeps championship hopes alive. Rain fell, tires cooled, pressure mounted. Those three words capture the intensity of that final Q3 moment perfectly. The entire field was gambling against meteorology as much as each other. Timing became more important than pure pace in those closing seconds. A driver leaving the pits 30 seconds later might face completely different track conditions. Hamilton's engineers had to process live radar data alongside sector times. They balanced the probability of rain against the value of another clean lap. Choosing to run when others stayed in the garage was a defining moment. It transformed what could have been a disappointing 6th or 7th into a solid 5th. That single decision salvaged maximum points potential from a difficult weekend. Without it, Sunday's race strategy would look dramatically more constrained. Starting behind both Red Bulls would have made overtaking nearly impossible. Now he at least has a fighting chance to challenge forward. So where does that leave us as we assess the true competitive order? The confirmed results show Ferrari firmly in a secondary tier behind McLaren and Mercedes, but the context of those results matters enormously for interpreting performance. Hamilton's P5 came with significant strategic assistance from favorable timing. Leclerc's P6 at 1:11.58 lacked that same last lap advantage. The gap between the two Ferraris was only 64 milliseconds. Both drivers remain roughly 4/10ths off the ultimate pace set by Norris. That deficit is substantial but not insurmountable over a full race distance. Tire degradation and pit stop execution will matter more than single lap speed tomorrow. Ferrari's upgraded package showed promising signs despite the adaptation challenges. The new floor generated sufficient downforce to keep them competitive in dry conditions. Whether that translates to race-long consistency remains the critical unknown. Hamilton's cautious optimism suggests he believes the car has more to give. But believing and proving are two very different things when chasing four faster games. Picture this for a second. You spend months learning the precise language of a high-performance machine, building muscle memory for every braking zone and apex, and then overnight someone rewrites half the dictionary. That is essentially what happened to Hamilton when Ferrari introduced their accelerated SF26 floor package at Zandvoort. This was not merely a bolt-on upgrade, but a fundamental shift in aeromechanical balance that demanded immediate recalibration. Motorsport. Com reported during sprint qualifying coverage that he has not yet completely adapted to these specific changes. The new floor was described by multiple Ferrari-focused outlets as a direct evolution of the component, first raced at Barcelona, Catalunya back at round 7. Yet, evolving apart does not mean the driver's relationship with it evolves at the same speed. Leclerc appeared far more comfortable with the revised downforce characteristics throughout the weekend sessions. He extracted performance from the soft compound that Hamilton simply could not match consistently. This disparity is not about talent or effort, but about neural adaptation to altered aerodynamic feedback. The car changed, his instincts lagged, trust fractured. Those three realities defined Hamilton's technical struggle more than any stopwatch reading. When a floor generates downforce differently, the car rotates and settles in ways that contradict years of accumulated feel. Braking points shift by meters rather than centimeters. Turn-in confidence becomes conditional rather than automatic. Leclerc's excellent understanding of the car on soft tires suggests his adaptation curve was steeper and faster. He qualified just 64 milliseconds behind his teammate in main qualifying, despite both using identical hardware. That gap represents the cost of incomplete familiarization rather than mechanical failure. No reliability issues were reported for either Ferrari in the session. The problem was purely experiential and therefore harder to solve between sessions. Engineers can adjust ride height or wing angles but cannot download muscle memory directly into a driver's nervous system. Fred Vasseur acknowledged this imbalance without deflecting blame onto external factors. He stated after sprint qualifying that they needed to work on the balance of the car to do better for Hamilton specifically. That admission confirms the team recognizes adaptation as the primary bottleneck right now. Meanwhile, Vasseur praised Leclerc for putting everything together in a very good lap during that same session. This contrast is not criticism of Hamilton, but honest assessment of where each driver sits relative to the new package. The 5 upgrades across floor, diffuser, and beam wing targeted increased downforce successfully. But successful aerodynamics only matter if the driver can exploit them confidently through 14 demanding corners. Zandvoort's unique banking amplifies any hesitation in car control. A driver still processing new aero signals will naturally leave margin on track. That margin accumulated into the 331-second deficit to pole position. It also explains why Hamilton's P5 required strategic risk-taking, while Leclerc's P6 came through more conventional execution. So what have we established about the technical foundation heading into race day? Ferrari possesses a car capable of front-running pace when fully understood. Leclerc's proximity to the McLaren-Mercedes quartet proves the SF26's ceiling is competitive. Hamilton's gap is therefore temporary rather than structural, assuming adaptation continues progressing. But temporary gaps still cost championship points when rivals are capitalizing immediately. Antonelli leads by roughly 50 points and starts third tomorrow. Russell begins second and has shown strong single-lap form all weekend. Norris on pole sets the benchmark everyone must chase. Hamilton's incomplete adaptation means he cannot rely solely on qualifying pace to recover ground. Race strategy and tire management become disproportionately important when starting 5th. The right execution he mentioned in his post-qualifying comments depends heavily on closing that confidence gap overnight. Whether that happens before lights out remains the defining variable for his Sunday prospects. Remember how this all started, with the flat contradiction that Hamilton wasn't simply outdriven but was managing a calculated rain risk to secure P5. That composed strategic execution stands in stark contrast to the raw frustration he voiced just hours earlier during sprint qualifying. In that separate session, he described the car as completely different from what he felt in FP1, despite making only subtle adjustments. He called it a bad session without qualification or excuse. Formula One. Calm captured his visible disappointment as he struggled to find rhythm in SQ3. The tonal shift between that moment and his main qualifying optimism is perhaps the most telling data point of the entire weekend. It suggests Ferrari made meaningful progress in understanding the new floor's behavior between sessions. But it also reveals how fragile driver confidence can be when adapting to major aerodynamic changes under competitive pressure. One session feels alien and hostile, while the next offers enough stability to attempt bold strategic gambles. Mood shifted, setup evolved, confidence returned. Those transitions happened remarkably fast given the technical complexity involved. Hamilton's post-sprint comments were notably blunt about the disconnect between practice and qualifying performance. He acknowledged FP1 felt good before everything changed unexpectedly. This honesty provided crucial feedback for engineers working overnight to restore balance. By main qualifying, his language had transformed into measured optimism rather than despair. He expressed gratitude for 5th place while still wishing for more. That emotional recalibration is itself a form of adaptation separate from mechanical setup. Drivers must process disappointment quickly to remain effective in back-to-back sessions. Hamilton's ability to compartmentalize sprint frustration and refocus for main qualifying demonstrates veteran resilience, but resilience alone cannot close a 33.1-second gap to pole position. The car still needs to deliver consistent aeromechanical feedback through every corner sequence.